Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us today. We are starting off the first hour on a webinar format, so you guys will all be off camera and unmuted or muted. So communicate through the chat as you are in Q&A. If you have any questions for our speakers, we'll start off with 3 guest speakers, and Steve will introduce them here. But yeah, I think that's everything. After our 3 speakers, we'll move everybody into to an on-screen role, so you'll be on camera and able to talk. So just be prepared for that after our 3rd speaker, and then we'll do kind of a more roundtable discussion format. So I believe that's everything. So Steve, our 2021 president, Steve Taylor, to introduce our, say a few words and introduce our speakers.
Great, thank you, Taylor and Kim, both for putting this together. Broker Roundtable is something that has grown in popularity over the years. It's something that I always look forward to. I think it's been a year and a half or so since we've had one. Unfortunately, this one is having to be via Zoom, and hopefully the next one will be open up enough to get us all back in a room together. Means so much to be able to talk in person. I'll tell you that this is one of my favorite things that we do. Years ago, I believe it was during George Jameson's tenure as president, that I came to a broker roundtable, and that's really what got me involved with CCRA again. So for all you new brokers in CCRA, I will tell you that this is one of the things that we do that I think really, truly, as you'll see today, benefit us all as brokers and brokers in charge. So with that being said,
can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Before you introduce our speaker, sorry, I forgot to do one thing. So before we start, Kathleen, can you put up a poll? We need everybody to vote on this, or if you can't see the poll, put it in the chat about, it just says, I agree that I will not engage in any antitrust discussions today that would restrain trade or otherwise be a violation. So if everybody can just vote in that poll real quick. As you see, if you vote to disagree, we'll have to remove you from the meeting. So once we get 100% on that, we'll move forward.
Okay, good. And I'll keep talking then, Taylor, while you do
go ahead.
Is that good? Yeah.
So
a couple of things that we've learned in the office today from the state is that the flood insurance program is going to be updated in October, where the new rates will come out October 1st, and then renewals will be next April of 22. And we will be seeing the flood insurance rates go down significantly from what we heard today. More information on that coming. The eviction moratorium was voted down in the courts, but then appealed again. So they are still alive and well. But there is an appeal going on, and we'll keep you informed where that comes out, how that comes out, I should say. And then one other thing was landlord relief funds and this new federal package coming out. We're learning more about that and what that means and how landlords can apply for those funds for relief for past due tenants. Again, all of that is growing as we speak. So as we gain knowledge, we will pass that on to the membership. It was interesting too today to learn that statewide we have 26,266 realtors in the state, and CCRA is well over the 3,000 mark. So realtors are growing strong with each day. So just thought that was some general information that might be interesting. How are we, Taylor?
We're good. We're at 100.
Yeah.
So we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Having said all that, let me introduce to y'all Rod Atkinson with the South Carolina Real Estate Commission. He's the Real Estate Commission Administrator. Rod has been kind enough to join us previously, and when there are new laws and new issues that we have to deal with from the licensing standpoint. And we want to welcome Rod, and we really appreciate your being here today to talk to us about all the things that are going on in your office. Rod said that he's been a little busy here lately with the fingerprinting and all of that. So having said that, Rod, please take over.
Thank you, as always, for inviting me and having me. And I'm glad to see all of you guys so eager to learn what's going on with the Real Estate Commission and licensing law. It is a pleasure to be able to talk to you all. But as mentioned, there is a lot going on right now. And you're probably all aware that the big thing going on right now is with the fingerprinting and the background checks. The law passed a couple years ago. Many of you are aware this is kind of political fallout from Todd Kohlhepp, who happened to have a real estate broker's license. A young lady was found chained up in a storage container on her property, and he confessed to also murdering several other people over the years. He came in really before we had requirements of background checks. We used to have kind of the honor system where an applicant would have to disclose, they would have to check yes that they've been convicted of a crime other than a minor traffic offense, and they would have to check yes on their application that they have any disciplinary history with another professional occupational licensing board. Just to tell you a little bit about how that would work. Back then, the individual would then have to get a background report from whatever jurisdiction where the offense occurred and provide that to the commission. It wasn't an issue where offense wasn't disclosed. It was an issue where offense happened, for one, as a youth, underage offense. Two, it was in a state, Arizona, where is a sealed record state. So everything was sealed. And three, the offense convicted of didn't really reflect the actual conduct of the individual, of what they actually did. I'm guessing that because the person was underage, the judge exercised some leniency. The final offense was easily explainable, and it was explained, it was disclosed. The individual, Mr. Kohlhepp, was licensed. He was licensed not just in South Carolina, but in North Carolina as well. However, he lived in South Carolina, and all the blowback came on the South Carolina Real Estate Commission, and all the political fallout fell on our legislators, and outrage fell on our legislators who felt the need to act in order to prevent this from happening again and to protect the public. We at least for 5 years prior to this implementation of this new law, we had a requirement for a criminal background check upon initial licensure, with the initial licensure application. And the wording of the law allowed a criminal background check to be from a commission approved source. It's a Social Security and name-based trace. So essentially the Real Estate Commission solicited a bid for a contract for a background screening provider that could, within the parameters set by the Real Estate Commission, provide services and allow applicants and licensees to essentially go on to a portal set up on our website, put in their information, pay a fee, and in most cases, they would get their report in 72 hours. This was working well. And the reports that we received, the commission was happy with. This was only initial licensure. So this was something that's been working well, I'd say, over the last 5 or 6 years now, I'd say. The big, I think, importance was the privacy and security, because the applicant actually obtained and submitted these reports and there wasn't fingerprinting involved. There were a lot less privacy restrictions that, other than what would come in when we talk about fingerprinting directly from the law enforcement agencies for licensure. That kind of adds layers and limitations on the use of the reports and restrictions on who can access and see the reports. So essentially what we had before was individuals could get their reports, they would see their reports, they would then send their application, they would disclose, of course, because they would see right in front of them if they had criminal offenses. They would give explanations. We would get all of that at one time and immediately be able to process their application. If it's something that somebody had an offense that falls under grounds for denial, or even had, conviction or a guilty plea in general, staff would be able to send me an email saying, please review this applicant and give me their information. I would review their background check from my office and send them an email saying whether or not I could approve. If I could not approve, I would communicate with them and say the reason I couldn't approve because of the offense, and that they would need to be scheduled for a hearing. And then I would schedule them for the next hearing. The difficulty that fingerprinting brought into the process is that when you, for licensing purposes, are obtaining fingerprint-based background checks from FBI and SLED, there's a lot of privacy restrictions as to when we can communicate to the applicant or to the licensee that they can seek the background check or can obtain the background checks. Of course, there's the logistic problems of people having to physically go out, get fingerprinting done, and for those results to be then sent to the law enforcement agencies, and then having to wait until those law enforcement agencies send us the reports. But there's also restrictions on, as I mentioned, on use and access and pretty much control of the reports that we receive. Right now, all of my staff had to get fingerprint clearance themselves and had to get authorization from the FBI to be able to even access records in our system as to whether or not the criminal background checks have been received. All we can put in our system is that, FBI was received on this date, SLED was received on this date, and whether or not there was prior arrest data. All of the actual reports, all the results have to be maintained in a secure room with limited access. Only authorized staff can go into that room. And the reports have to stay in that room. Not only do they have to stay in that room, they have to be locked up in file cabinets in that room. So it is very, secure and very restricted, which is a good thing because people's personal reports and information is not going to get out and circulate. But the logistic problem that presents is that one, the individuals do not see their reports before they apply. So often they will check no, and they will not disclose, and they will not, everybody has the excuse that they don't remember, that I'm sorry, they forgot, they didn't read the question correctly. But we're seeing a lot of that. We can't share the reports. We can't bring them out of the room. We can't put them in their system. We can't scan them. So we can't, we really aren't even supposed to reference them when the fingerprint-based reports, when we are discussing this. So I have to spend a lot of time going back and forth with applicants and individuals without referencing the reports. Often I'll have to go to public indexes or try to find the information from other sources and provide them that information to be able to discuss and get them to disclose. But really we have to rely a lot upon the individual to provide the records and the disclosures that we can utilize for hearings, for example, before the Real Estate Commission. The Real Estate Commission itself cannot see the reports, the actual fingerprint reports. We cannot bring them out of the room. So when they have hearings, we have to rely on piecemeal records produced by the applicant. So as you imagine, it's cumbersome, it's time consuming, it is a difficult process when we start talking about all the privacy restrictions with fingerprinting. So I just recently, as I think last week or the week before last, there was actually a bill that I think was signed by the governor already that would put back in the Social Security-based trace. However, it's essentially doubling up. It's going to double up effective next year. You're going to have to get the fingerprinting and you're going to have to get the name-based trace, simply because you really can't utilize the fingerprinting results for hearings and for communication and being able to discuss these results with the applicants or with the licensees. So there's going to be a doubling up just out of administrative necessity to be able to continue with the intent, I guess the legislative intent in implementing these background checks to begin with. I imagine there's going to be a lot of overlap and redundancy. I haven't done an apples to apples comparison between the name-based, Social Security-based searches versus the fingerprint results, because for one, I can't bring them out of the room. And when we did start fingerprinting, we had to discontinue our contract with the third-party provider, so we're not seeing the same reports for the same people at the same time. I do know that the commission was happy with the fingerprint well, with the name-based search and social security-based search reports that they were receiving, it was a lot less paper because there are a lot of pages and a lot of documentation, a lot of pages, I'd say. I say it's kind of old school as far as the reports we do receive, what I see in the background check room when I go in there to review. Like it may be a FBI and SLED report that come in separately, and each one may be 15 pages long. And they might have one offense on each. So we have to match those together. We have to file them. If staff is not able to approve, I have to go in and I have to actually sit in that background check room, in that secure room, and sit there for hours and sometimes late at night reviewing background checks. And the volume that's coming in right now, we're printing 4,000 pages of background checks a day, every single day. So that's like 20 boxes, not just reams, but 20 boxes of copier paper a month. So we're burning through this stuff, and it is very cumbersome and very kind of difficult for our staff. I have to have 3 staff. I have had to allocate full time to the background check room, just kind of pulling, printing, sorting, reviewing, and determining whether I need to review reports. So I have 3 staff in there from 8:30 until after 5 most days, just pulling their reports. That means 3 staff that's off the phones, that's not processing applications. It's difficult right now. Renewals are always difficult, but now we have, and you mentioned numbers of realtors earlier and members of the association. When I became administrator, we had around 38,000 real estate licensees in South Carolina. As of the last time I pulled numbers, which was right before our extended renewal deadline. So I imagine some people did cancel and not renew, but we had over 61,000. Last month, we added, if I saw a report that came out today, 768 applications were processed. So we're adding 500 to 700 plus new licensees a month at this rate. Things are good. Things are growing. The real estate industry, as you know, is on fire right now. A lot of people are getting into the industry. And we're trying to move this stuff along as quickly as possible. But administratively, it's hard for us. It's hard for us right now. So I think that having the second background check is going to make it at least easier for me because I don't have to go back and forth and do the research, and we can actually use these in hearings before the commission. But I did want to kind of give you the heads up that soon as we're going to have to bid out a contract soon for a provider to do these reports, and people renewing in 2022 are going to have to get fingerprinted. You got the people who are renewing this year are only going to have to do the fingerprints. They're not going to also have to do the social security based trace, but I imagine next year they're going to have to do both. And that also applies to initial licensure once that contract is awarded. So I kind of wanted to give you guys the latest that's hot off the presses on the background check thing. And again, the reasoning behind this implementation of these background check requirements. I kind of want to screen share really quickly. I have a kind of 1 page dealing with kind of the issues with the background checks and kind of some pointers for you guys and things just to be aware of. Hopefully everybody's able to see this screen share, but I also want to talk about COVID-19 right now and how we've been working. We've been out of the office. Well, we were told nobody comes in the office around March. I'd say it was either 18th or 19th, 2020, when COVID was really picking up. So we were working mainly remotely for a while, and then we started getting assigned laptops, and there was limited staffing in the office. There was a very limited amount of people that were in our building. As you know, LLR is a large agency. We have 42 licensing boards in our agency, in our building. Real Estate Commission is one of them and one of the largest boards. But it was very difficult because we didn't have enough staffing necessarily to man the phones for a while. And most people were working remotely on most days just to maintain social distancing. As of the governor's recent executive order, or orders lifting pretty much the restrictions and ordering everyone back to work as far as the state government, back to the offices, we have been back in the office for maybe a couple months now, full time. We're fully staffed in the office. We are here every day. There's been a few things that are ongoing regarding licensing and regarding being able to make sure that licensing is still moving with, for example, our education providers that the commission has approved through the end of the year. We are still not meeting in person. We are still not dealing too much with walk-ins and meeting with people. At our agency, walk-ins essentially are going to a kiosk where they're notifying us which board they're here for. Members of staff are calling the individuals if they wait in the lobby or in their car and seeing if they can assist them. If they're just dropping off something, they'll just drop off their applications. If they have some questions, the individual will try to assist them, or either will come down to help them to make sure their paperwork is in order. But generally speaking, people are not being able to go beyond the lobby right now. And we are encouraging people to, handle what they can online, just to limit exposure of our staff and of the people who are the members of the public who are coming in. Right now, we've been doing virtual commission meetings. We have not missed meetings. We've been doing this by WebEx all year. It is continuing for a while simply because with commission meetings, we have a lot of commissioners, we have a lot of applicants and respondents and disciplinary hearings and a lot of people that have to be in a room together at the same time. We're still trying to make sure we're keeping everyone safe with social distancing. So with real estate being a larger, more active board, we are not going back to in-person meetings at least until August. So we're kind of monitoring to see how things go with smaller boards right now and seeing when we can resume in-person meetings. But right now, we're doing all virtually. We are still moving with disciplinary and application hearings. If people do have criminal offenses, that need a hearing, I'm putting that together and sending them information to be able to attend a virtual hearing. And those have been moving pretty successfully. The other thing which was approved, I think, at our last commission meeting was classroom education providers, for example, with CE and initial licensure classes. We have what's called a distance education providers, and then we have our classroom providers. Distance education providers and courses have gone through this certification of their class through IDEC or Arello to be able to offer their class virtually. They are kind of testing the delivery method, the timing of the format of delivery, the interactivity, and they get the certification where they are approved, the courses are approved for distance education. Our education guidelines require this for distance education in most cases. And distance education is defined as any pretty much virtual online classes. As of last year, since COVID hit, the commission has approved that those who are approved to teach classes with the commission, whether it be CE or initial licensure, as classroom providers, can do those by webinars virtually. So right now, most providers are doing like WebEx or Zoom or other formats to have their instructions with live instructors, live sessions, scheduled times as usual, but they will have someone there rather than kind of the virtual formatted distance education classes that we usually see where there is not a live instructor that is sitting there with you as you go through the class and able to answer questions. So that's been extended actually through the end of the year. We will see if it goes any further than that, but at least through the end of the year, the schools are very happy that they're able to schedule, their classes right now and provide, CE through these renewals to individuals that need their CE. Important notes for renewals. Definitely, this is a big thing. Please keep your contact information updated with the commission. And by contact information, one thing that people often do is that they put as their address under their license file, their office address. They'll only have a company or brokerage email on file. And we have the phone number is their office with their brokerage. We have no other way of contacting them if they leave the brokerage. They have no other way of recovering and accessing their account if they need to log in and they no longer have their email address. They do not get important renewal reminders and other notices from the commission. They miss all this. So there's been situations where brokerages have contacted us saying they've gotten renewal notices in the mail for individuals who are no longer with the company. They don't have their contact information to forward it to them, and we don't have it either. So those individuals may expire and may lose their license because they didn't maintain their personal contact information on file with the commission. And your email address, really, we strongly encourage you to use a permanent personal email address rather than a brokerage email address, because if you change your brokerages, you often will lose access to your account. You will miss reminders. You won't be able to recover your password and everything to transfer and change your mailing address or whatever you need to do. Also, make sure that your address on file is not your brokerage address. It's your personal contact address. When we license you and we affiliate you with a brokerage office, the system automatically links at least where we send your pocket card and your affiliation to that office. That office is also what shows up on our website licensee lookup as your public address. We do not share your personal information, your personal addresses, your personal email, your personal phone number. If someone subpoenas or FOIA requests that information, we cannot provide that under the South Carolina Family Privacy Protection Act. So that is not going to be shared. It will only show your office information, but for your personal license, you need to have your personal contact information on file. The law actually requires this, and it requires that you have your residential address on file with the commission. This is what we use to determine if you have to take CE for South Carolina or if you're exempt based on residency. And for us, if we have to, if we have a complaint or we have an order or something important, or we have something we need to serve upon you, we can't legally serve you or we can't locate you. We will serve the address that we have on file for you. We'll utilize the information to try to contact you that we have on file. But if that's not valid, if that's not your information, you might not get it. So that is very important. That saves us a lot of hassle of constantly having to update your information, update your emails every time you transfer or every time you go inactive. So I talked about the background checks. 21 and 22 renewals will require the background checks. We're doing it per cycle because, again, with 61,000 licensees, it's impossible for us to track every third renewal for every individual. So everyone this year is going to have to get it to be active. Everyone next year is going to have to get it for renewal to be active status. If you renew as inactive, you do not get the background clearance, and you need to reactivate down the line, you're going to have to get that clearance before you can reactivate. And just know that it's a good idea to go ahead and get it, even if you're inactive, because essentially you'll be good for 6 years until every third renewal, which would be 6 years from now. So 2027 and 2028, we're going to have to do it again if the law doesn't change.
Rob, we had a question about that. So is that going to be required for each renewal to get the fingerprints?
Every third renewal.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, every third. So every 6 years, essentially. 2027 will be the next third renewal from now. And then for those renewing in 2022, they will have to do it again in 2028. So we're going to keep it on certain cycles where we're going to send out communications to everyone that you're due to get renewed this year and to get your background check done. So please make sure that's done before the end of the renewal cycle. And another thing to touch on, if you go in and you're renewing right now, and there's going to be a question on the renewal application that says, have you gotten fingerprinted for your background check? If you answer yes, that you've gotten fingerprinted, you move forward to the next question. If you answer no, it's going to ask you, do you wish to go on inactive status and not get fingerprinted right now? You can answer yes or no again. If you answer yes, the system will inactivate you after you renew. If you answer no, it will just remind you, we need your background check clearance before the end of this renewal cycle, or you will possibly be placed on inactive status. So we are not taking adverse action if you say you haven't gotten your fingerprinting done and you say that you do not want to go inactive, it will allow you to renew. It will allow you to finish your renewal. But at a certain time at the end of renewals, we're going to have something in our system. We have a kind of a designator, what's called an action item, where it designates who we receive background checks for and the date. So essentially those who renewed or those who were active status who were due to renew this year, at the end of the year, the system's going to run a report to see if all those individuals have gotten their background clearance. If not, they're going to be inactivated. We're going to try to send out a notice to everybody who haven't gotten clearance for in advance. We're going to run that a little bit early so that we can notify those we haven't received your fingerprint background clearance. Please note that you're currently active status. If we do not receive clearance by a certain date, you're going to be placed on inactive status. And then we're also going to notify people that if you have gotten fingerprinted and we haven't received the results, Identigo is the contractor. The name of the company is Identigo, and they're a contractor for SLED. And they're kind of, even if you're mailing in fingerprint cards, you have to register with them and you have to send it to them for processing. If you are a South Carolina resident, for the most part, you can schedule an appointment at an Identigo location. Make sure you're scheduling for South Carolina Real Estate Commission fingerprinting for licensure fingerprinting. And you just get digitally fingerprinted and they send the fingerprints to SLED and the FBI. You pay them. They run all the process and the reports come back to us. So everything is done through Identigo. But there are some circumstances where people get printed and we never get the reports. Identigo gives you what's called a TCN number after you have gotten fingerprinted with them. And that is essentially the identifier that we need in order to reach out to the law enforcement agencies if someone got fingerprinted for us and we did not receive the reports, to be able to retrieve those reports from SLED and FBI. So a lot of times, people say, if someone's applying, they are checking on status. They say they got fingerprinted, a month ago, and we still are waiting. We ask them for the TCN number. We then have our background check staff to reach out to the law enforcement agencies with that number to research and to produce the reports at their earliest convenience. So we are able to clear that up once we notify people if they have gotten fingerprinted and if we just haven't gotten the results. But for the most part, they do come in. There are also situations where people get fingerprinted, but they get rejected. The fingerprints get rejected. For us, for the background check purposes, for fingerprinting for licensure, we have to have 2 rejections before we can request what's called a name-based search. Each time they're rejected, Identigo will send them a letter with a rejection letter, and it will have a TCR number on it instead of TCN. But that TCR is the rejection number. After a second the first time it'll tell them to reschedule an appointment or either to, resubmit the fingerprints for them to try again. So after the second rejection, they'll send a letter with both rejection TCR numbers and to reach out to the commission or board to request a name-based search. So they'll provide us a copy of that letter or their TCR numbers, and then our staff will reach out to the law enforcement agencies to request that name-based search because of the second rejection. And usually we get those back pretty quickly. But that's another kind of logistic issue. There's many reasons fingerprints might be rejected. It happens a lot with the nursing board, to my understanding, because they wash their hands so frequently, their fingerprints aren't good. But there is a procedure if people get their fingerprint rejected, they are going to have to, go back and get fingerprinted again the first time. They're not going to have to pay again. They're just Identigo is going to try to process their prints again. But after that second rejection, they can request a name-based search. After that, we have a new mandatory core class called A Walk Through the Law. It used to be 3 Ps of professionalism, but the new class rolled out, I want to say September of last year, and replaced the 3 Ps of professionalism class. So that is going to be the class many people who are taking CE now are going to have to take for their active renewal. If you took 3 Ps between June 30th of 2019 and I want to say September 30th of 2020, 20, then that was the core course at the time still. So that will apply still to your renewal as the core course. However, if you have taken it after, I want to say October 1st of 2020, you are going to need the Walk Through the Law class, which is the current 4-hour mandatory core class. Other than the core class, of course, with the 4 hours, everybody needs 6 hours of elective courses. Those are electives of your choice. You can find the CE course calendar for approved providers and offerings of classes on our website under the education section when you go to the Real Estate Commission's website. But if you are not a broker in charge, typically you're going to need the 4-hour core class and 6 hours of electives. If you are a broker in charge, you're going to need the 4-hour core class. There's also a 4-hour BIC duties and responsibilities class. This changed with the 2017 law that is required of brokers in charge. So you're only going to have 2 hours of electives that you need to take for a total of 10 hours. If you have a permanent exemption that was issued or that you had 65 years of age and 25 years of experience prior to January 1st, 2017, there was a permanent full exemption that you could have applied for, or you still can apply for if you qualified under that period for full exemption from South Carolina CE. The applications for that also are under the education section of our website. And then after 2017, there's a partial exemption that will only exempt you from elective courses. So that form also is under the education section of our website, but you have to have 25 years of license experience in order to earn the partial exemption. So really that's all I wanted to really touch on that's going on right now. Again, it's very important that you keep your updated personal information on file with the commission. I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
Well, thank you, Rod. We'll go into, I see we got a couple of questions. So
okay,
go into that section and then we'll let you go. So
yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was very educational. Kim, you want to get those questions?
Yeah, so Rod, so this one's a pretty specific question, but somebody got fingerprinted and background checked for their broker license a few months ago. Their license expires in 2022. Do they still need to get fingerprinted again since they just did that?
And the answer to that is yes, because the initial licensure and renewal fingerprinting are considered separate purposes. And we've had, we had to get approval from FBI and SLED to start the renewal fingerprinting. And there was a certain date that we sent out the communication regarding the renewal fingerprinting, and that is essentially the start date where we were able to get the clearance and start getting the reports for the renewal fingerprinting. Ashley, this is kind of a question I'm dealing with advice counsel right now, because there are people who applied to maybe upgrade the broker in February or even March before the renewal approval came, that are also due to renew this year. And they're asking frequently, whether they have to get clearance again. To me, it doesn't make sense because if we just cleared them to have to get another report. But the answer we've been told initially was yes, they would have to get it if they did not do it during this essential renewal clearance cycle. I'm talking to advice counsel for the commission right now to see if we can accept reports, at least through the beginning of the year for this year, for this year's renewal, and rather than having people have to get another report. So I'm waiting on an answer on that. But definitely, if you just got clearance this year and you're renewing next year, you're going to have to get the fingerprinting done again.
And then another good question that we got was if somebody has a fingerprint from, let's say, a concealed weapons permit, they still will have to go through Identico for this year to get renewed, correct?
That's correct. And there's a if you go to the Real Estate Commission's website, on our main page, there's an alert. There's a bunch of alerts at the top of the page in red. And the first alert is a renewal. There's a fingerprinting FAQ. It both deals with renewal fingerprinting and initial licensure. But essentially, as I mentioned, all the privacy restrictions and all the restrictions when it comes with fingerprinting. Fingerprinting and background clearance cannot be shared between agencies and purposes. So if you got cleared for another purpose, whether it be CWP, whether it be TSA clearance, whether it be for any other security clearance, and you've gotten fingerprinted and it wasn't specifically for the real estate commission, we cannot receive or we cannot utilize those. Even if you got fingerprinted for another license with another board at LLR, we can't share them between boards. For example, if you have a nursing license and you got fingerprinted for the nursing board, it can't be shared with the real estate commission. So it's clearance for each purpose.
Okay. All right. I think that's all the questions we had, Steve.
Okay, great. Well, again, Rod, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, and you're always out with keeping up with everything. So thanks.
And one last word to everybody: please don't give my staff a hard time about this fingerprinting stuff. Gotcha. Don't beat us up. We didn't do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us.
No problem. Y'all have a good day.
Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.
So next up, I'm so excited to introduce Carl Blackstone, President and CEO of Columbia Chamber. And we're glad to have him. And he's going to give us an update on what's going around in the city and upcoming election, what businesses have been doing during this COVID time, and how you have actually played today on that golf course. You're on mute, Carl.
Is that the most overused term of the last year? Is you're on mute? I apologize. Yes, I am at a golf course. No, I'm not playing. It's the Chamber's annual golf tournament today. So thanks for letting me come with the no towel on, which I was impressed to see Taylor had a towel on. So he's one up of me. But anyway, great to be with y'all. I thought I hit a few things, and then y'all feel free to shoot questions my way as you see fit. But it's been an interesting year. I mean, y'all are on the forefront of all the economic news. I should be asking y'all questions versus me up here talking, because of the amount of volume that y'all are seeing come into this area in the state. I mean, the Southeast is just on fire, and in markets that normally wouldn't be on fire. And obviously Charleston and Raleigh are still booming, but the amount of influx of new people, it really does make everybody bring out those old Yankee jokes more and more, right? I mean, we're seeing so many new people coming down, and I've heard stories from realtors about how people are buying property sight unseen and just do a virtual tour, and it's just amazing. But at the same time, we've seen, unfortunately for Columbia, we have grown in the last 10 years, mainly in the hospitality and retail. And we've seen a lot of hardships in those areas because of lack of tourism and lack of mobility. But I think Columbia is coming around. We're seeing a lot more traffic downtown, which is good. I mean, traffic's a sign of growth, and we're a lot more people are getting out and about. And I think it's interesting. Most every year, y'all see this in your business like I do. August is summertime, so slow in Columbia, and then once school starts back, it's like everybody's back at work, and it's like a light switch comes on, everybody's ready to go. Same was true just last month when finally Richland school districts were able to go back to school 5 days. It's like everybody's back, and there felt a little bit of normalcy, but people are anxious to see their businesses get back in full time. And so now we're just waiting on, I think, the corporate folks, the national companies to come back in the office full time, because we've seen the locals, they didn't miss a beat, but the national folks, I'm hearing a lot of companies going to open up July 1. Some are opening August, some are September, but coming in at a staggered pace, which is interesting. I stayed home 2 days. I had four daughters that were home, so it was quieter at my office than it was at house. So I was so excited to have an office to go to. But it is a sign, government shut down last March government shut things down in a matter of 2 days. corporate attorneys are opening things back up, and it's taken a year. Go figure. But anyway, the economy's starting to see signs of life in the Midlands. We're excited about that. Seeing some job openings. This is staggering, okay? Spartanburg County, for the first 3 months of this year, saw $791 million worth of capital investment in 2,700 jobs. I think it's technically 2,776. 2,700 jobs in Spartanburg County in 3 months. Staggering. And we've seen some economic development here in the Midlands. $60 million investment in Blue Cross Blue Shield, adding 700 employees, which is huge. White Claw, Mark Anthony Bruin announced a distillery, the largest distillery to be built in North America in 25 years. It's a $400 million investment, and with 300 new employees, which is terrific for us here in the Midlands. But between those two announcements, they're huge, but we haven't seen the growth that Spartanburg, and certainly not the growth that Charleston is seeing. So it scratches your head a little bit. And we talked about this here with y'all before, about some of the challenges that we have in the Midlands is predominantly around our tax structure and some of the challenges there. But despite those challenges, we've been growing, and which is a good thing. We're seeing it's more of a shift, right? Y'all see this every day as well. We're seeing some migration patterns here, that folks moving out of downtown and going to Northeast Columbia, and those in Northeast Columbia are going over to Chapin or Lexington County, mainly for schools. Schools are driving that migration pattern more than anything, but taxes as well. And so I was really pleased that the city of Columbia produced a study. Rebecca Gunlifson, who is a well-respected economist here in Columbia, produced a study that really took an in-depth look at Columbia's taxes, and that's not just City of Columbia. It's Richland County and the school districts as well. It's really startling. It shouldn't be startling, but just seeing some numbers on paper, startling. What was crazy is how out of whack we are. And but the good news is the city produced this study, so we can actually hopefully move forward for there. I'll come back to that, the next steps, but couple of things for y'all to look at, and especially in your line of work. We all know that Richland County's got some tax struggles, but what's interesting is you take, for example, Richland 1 and Richland 2, both are high taxed areas, but for totally different reasons. And this came out of the studies. Richland 1 has seen a decrease in population, if you can believe that. In this crazy time, we're seeing a decrease in population in Richland 1. And so the tax burden has been shifted a little bit to the commercial sector more so, because there's not as many people. Conversely, Richland 2 has seen a huge boom in population, but the people there, residential, you don't really see the residential homes don't cover the cost, right? I mean, you get 50% of the taxes taken off because of Act 388. And so what's left doesn't really cover all the costs associated with services. And so the commercial sector picks up the brunt of it. And so what you're seeing in Richland 2 is more owner-occupied homes, less commercial. And so that burden is also making the commercial taxes higher in Richland 2. So both have high taxes, but different reasons. And right now we're still, Charleston and Greenville taxes are about, well, let's just say that we're 60% higher than those two marketplaces. That's right, 60%, which is just crazy. So it's stunting our growth a little bit. And so we've got to work on that. The good news is the city is willing to address it. It is an election year, which makes it the timing suspect. What we hope to see, well, I don't want to put too rosy a picture on it, but let me just say this. What city council has done, remember it's an election year, and I'm not cynical at all, but they have taken a tax study that was produced by somebody that they all agreed upon as the excellent person to do the tax study. And now they've all brought in 4 more economists to go review the work of the current economists, and they're going to come out with another study. So we're going to do a study committee to look at the study committee. You can't make this up, but whatever. At least the conversation is getting out there a little bit, and I'm hopeful that once the election gets past us, that we can actually see some movement there. I don't see anything happening before November, which in Columbia is big because this year we got city council elections, and for the first time, we actually could have 4 new members of Columbia City Council, which is amazing. So Steve Benjamin, obviously not running again. And for mayor, he's been mayor for 3 terms, and for all cases done a really good job. I appreciate Steve's ability to have a vision and to work and have conversations with all of us, agree to disagree, but we could easily talk. So I appreciate Steve. So he's stepping down. Tamika Isaac Devine, a current member, as well as Daniel Rickman, both are vying for the mayor's spot, along with Sam Johnson, who used to work for Steve as his chief of staff. But both Tamika and Daniel have to give up their seat to run for mayor. So that opens up 2 new seats. And then Sam Davis, a long-term member of city council from North Main area, has decided to step down. So we could have 4 new seats coming around, which is interesting, and which changes in the air. So we'll see where that tax study takes us. You're also going to see for Tamika's seat, it's an at-large seat. We've got 5 people running for that. Daniel's seat, you'll see an announcement next week, but maybe just possibly a former Secretary of Commerce will be running for that seat, which will be interesting. And so lots of activity around those city elections. Filing does not open until August. So unlike state seats, there's a lot bigger lag because these are nonpartisan, so we don't have to have primaries. The filing is in August, and the election would be first week of November. So what's going to happen? Who knows? But I will promise you, you should pop some popcorn and start paying attention in August, because it's going to get feisty is what I think is going to happen. So, but optimistic at the end of the day that we'll get something out of taxes. The problem is this, and this is where we could use your help. You see it every day in your line of work. People look at their property tax bills and say, well, owner-occupied homes, it's not really a big deal, but commercial, the way y'all get dinged is unbelievable. The average voter, the average citizen of South Carolina or the city of Columbia or Richland County, they do not understand taxes. In fact, I'll talk taxes all day long, but most sane people, it just gives them, they give you the stare. They gloss over and they could care less. But it's so complicated. And so in fairness to them, the average person shouldn't understand it, quite frankly. It is so convoluted. But when our taxes are so out of whack and the average voter thinks that businesses pay the same amount as homeowners, and there's no delineation between a property that sold last year versus one that sold 10 years ago. The bottom line is it has a significant negative effect on economic development here and for future job growth. And we've got to really be thinking about that. We've got more assets in this community. Y'all have heard me say this before. We are so fortunate to have so many assets. We just underutilize quite a number of them. And so I would say we've got a university, we've got 3 interstates, we've got a Port of Charleston, which is located 100 miles, Charlotte, Atlanta, Greenville, you name it. We're close enough to everything. And the Southeast, the Sun Belt is seeing such growth. We're going to continue to see that. Where I think the biggest opportunity we have is with the university, because COVID has changed the game a little bit. Over the last, well, since the Great Recession, businesses had decided to locate where there's talent. They want to go where people don't have to move and they don't have to relocate. And so since COVID, people are moving to smaller cities. They're getting out of the metro areas, the New Yorks and Phillies and Bostons and Chicago. They don't want to be cooped up and they don't want another snowfall. So they're moving south, which is good. So I do think businesses were actually going to follow. And so I think that bodes well for y'all in your industry. I think it's great to see home prices continue to rise, days on market shorter. We just need inventory. And so where I think we've got to also be very diligent. I know y'all, the Realtor Association came out, Central Carolina's Realtor Association came out against the moratorium a couple weeks ago in Lexington County. That we're going to have to be very diligent in fighting these local governments in the next few years, because this is just the tip of the iceberg, I think, of what's coming. When you see growth and you see traffic, those are growing pains. Those are signs of positive economic growth. The problem is they can also stunt your growth. And so, and we're seeing that. That's a natural reaction. Folks in northwest part of the county are frustrated with all the growth. And so the Lexington County trying to put a moratorium on things. I get it. Traffic's bad. Garbage pickup is bad. You name it. But the bottom line is I would rather have to deal with those issues than I have any growth at all. So again, growing pains are not a bad thing. You just got to be proactive and you got to deal with them on the front end. So that's what they're doing. So thanks for working with us on that. And I know y'all, again, the chamber doesn't like moratoriums. Y'all don't like moratoriums, but we're going to have to work with those county governments to help us on that. So, all right, Kim, I'm happy to talk more topics if you're thinking of one that I haven't hit.
I think you've pretty much covered it. Unless anybody has any questions that y'all want to ask Carl before he goes back on the golf course.
As I'm working on the golf course today.
Well, I tell you the one thing, Carl, you said that hits home more than anything else is that City of Columbia, taxes are 60% higher than Charleston and Spartanburg comparatively. If we don't remember anything else, that's something we should remember.
It is penal. I mean, we are really feeling it, and it's going to take some creativity to fix it. I think the state policy in Act 388, the unintended consequences of that bill when it passed in 2006, no one could have seen it. And quite frankly, I don't think that's going to change in my lifetime. I don't think we're going to put taxes back on owner-occupied homes. Other words, voters. I think, where it's easy to penalize commercial properties, what we're going to have to look at and think creatively and outside the box is, can local jurisdictions get waivers to that? Can we come up with some ways to offset the commercial taxes? Because quite frankly, we have so much government in Columbia, Fort Jackson, USC, but that's not a bad thing to have them here. We just don't have the tax base to help offset what's hurting everybody else. And so we may need to be creative on that and figure out a way to lessen that burden on the commercial industry going forward. It will help job growth, no doubt about it. It would help job growth. So if y'all have not seen that tax study and you want to get blurry-eyed, it should be on our website. If not, I'll put it there or send it y'all. But it is I would highly encourage you to read the executive summary. It's a short version, but it will wake you up. And again, y'all's income is based upon growth, and we need to see those tax burdens lessened just to see more economic activity.
All right. Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you for joining us. Yeah,
thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, you heard Carl mention, Act 388, and that segues great into our next speaker. We are very excited to have Swati Patel, went from the State Chamber of Commerce. She was the, when the State Chamber was looking for a new CEO, she was the interim CEO for the Chamber, and she is also the Executive Vice President of Public Policy, Affiliates, and Council at the Chamber. You may recognize her. She was former Governor Nikki Haley's Chief of Staff, a few years back. And Carl was talking about the local tax study. Very soon after that, there was a statewide tax study introduced, and the State Chamber, in partnership with the South Carolina Realtors, SCR, released this tax study, talking about some of the things Carl was bringing up, and Swati will kind of be more detailed. So Swati, thank you so much for joining us, and appreciate having you.
Thank you, Taylor. Really appreciate being here. Very excited actually to be to speaking with you guys. I actually just put my house on the market last week, so I can't wait to hopefully take advantage of this highly unusual hot market condition, but hoping to make some money. We'll see. But no, I'm really excited to be here. Carl did do a great segue for me talking about state policy. I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind. I'm going to get a little bit in the weeds on some charts and graphs. Carl did a great kind of big picture look at the tax climate, and I'm going to go into some details. So give me a second and I'll share my screen. Oops, sorry about that. Always have to find the right thing here. Here we go. Can y'all see me? Can y'all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, so yes, we did a statewide study on our property tax system. We initiated that study with the Realtors Association about a year and a half. Yeah, about a year and a half ago now. It's kind of hard to keep up because of COVID. COVID kind of put a big pause on our release of the study, but we did, it's a jointly funded study with our foundation here at the Chamber and the Realtors Association. We chose, I know Rebecca Gunlockson really well. She's a fantastic economist, and I'm glad that the City of Columbia used her. We ended up going with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. The reason we chose that as our analyst for the study is because they do something called the 50 state property tax rankings. It's something that a lot of economic developers look at, and it does give a good kind of big picture understanding of all the 50 states property tax climate. And in terms of where the South Carolina Chamber is, we're always looking at how we can be more competitive with our neighbors, our other states. And so that's the reason we use the Lincoln Institute. So the methodology of the study quickly is we chose 10 diverse counties around the state based on population, rural versus urban, whether there was a lot of that nonprofit land in a county like Richland County, for example. And so I'll show you those 10 counties in a second. They also use multiple data sets. So again, the whole point of the study is I think we all know that our property tax system is broken. What we were trying to do is how can we validate that in a way to show lawmakers that, look, here is the analysis behind what we all see in our economy now and in our, our property tax issues. We all know what they are, but let's validate it with some numbers. And then also get some policy options from an organization like the Lincoln Institute. They also interviewed a range of public finance experts, lots of stakeholders, a diverse group of businesses on sectors and sizes, local governments, school districts, dozens and dozens of folks around the state they interviewed, including our county officials, auditors, assessors. Ultimately, the study ended up being 410 pages long. So again, I would also encourage you to read just the executive summary here. and the policy options, which is available on our website as well. So here are the 10 diverse counties we selected. You see Greenville, York. We looked at border counties as well, because border counties actually have a really interesting situation as it relates to competitiveness. We have Richland and Sumter. We chose them because of the nonprofit federal lands that are in those counties with the university here, the hospital. Goodness, the hospital land here actually in Richland County is pretty significant. We wanted to select some coastal counties, of course, and then our very small rural counties as well. So ultimately, big picture, the Lincoln Institute's conclusions are, again, not a shock, right? South Carolina's property tax system is complex, inequitable, inefficient, lacks transparency, and is disproportionately burdensome to private enterprise. Again, not a shock. In particular, they point out Act 388. I was actually in the governor's office in 2006 when Act 388 passed. Not something I'm particularly proud of in terms of the unintended consequences that we all knew was going to occur, but they passed it anyway. And so their conclusion about Act 388 is that, it was passed with the aim of providing property tax relief to certain homeowners, primarily on the coast. However, by shifting greater property tax burdens from homeowners to businesses and renters, it increased the disparity in property tax rates, making South Carolina an outlier compared to the rest of the US. And I'm going to show you some statistics and charts and graphs that really back that up. All right, so in terms of how we got to start from the top, right? Like, how do we end up with a property tax system that is truly disparate in how it's assessed? Well, first you start with our Constitution. Our Constitution sets out these ratios by land use type. This is actually not very common around the country. We have different ratios for different property types. Owner occupied here, of course, is 4%. You've got commercial at 6%. Manufacturing it's at 10.5 in the Constitution, but actually when they passed the infrastructure bill a few years ago, that was lowered to 9%. So now that's at 9%. What else affects that disparate way that we calculate our taxes? Act 388, of course. The biggest issue is our O&M exemption. That's our operations and maintenance, which was basically removed. Oops, sorry about that. It was removed from the tax bills, which is, of course, for primary homes, which is a major factor of why there's a shift of tax burdens to the non-owner occupied properties. And again, Carl did a great job of explaining kind of how that shift has affected Richland County and the Midlands. And again, one thing that you might not know, but South Carolina is actually the only state in the country that does not levy property tax on primary residences to cover school operating costs. We are the only state that does that. Now, there is another state that does not levy taxes, property taxes. It's Michigan, actually, but they have replaced it with the statewide education property tax. And so they still assess the tax, they just don't do it at that local level. So before I get into some of these charts, I do want to be able to explain what I'm talking about. I'm going to talk a lot about effective tax rate. What we mean by that in the study is basically tax payment as it relates to market value. So a homeowner who pays $1,000 in property taxes on a home valued at $100,000 faces an ETR, effective tax rate, of 1%. So the higher the ETR, the higher the burden on that homeowner or that property owner. Okay, so comparing two tax bills for two South Carolina property types. And I'm going to focus here again on owner occupied and non-owner occupied. The study actually goes a little bit deeper and talks about our apartments almost as a separate category, because actually around the country, many states will have a separate tax kind of classification for apartments. We don't really do that here. We just have non-owner occupied, which encompasses commercial, apartment, second homes. So that's what we mean by non-owner occupied. You see here, obviously, 2 tax bills. We have 2 different tax ratios set by the Constitution. We're going to have 2 different millage rates because one is not going to include O&M. And then you see what your property tax bill looks like. I mean, it is significantly higher, right? You're looking at 3 times higher than owner occupied. And this is actually the largest differential in the country, where you have a difference between homestead or primary homeowner, owner occupied versus the non-owner occupied ratio. And so they do a lot of analysis on that in the study. I also want to compare different states here in the region. So the study picks out the highest populated city in a state and compares that based on different property types. So in South Carolina right now, Charleston has the highest population, and we're going to compare that to Charlotte and Atlanta. And of course, you see the US average. And so by different property types, you see here how the disparities between industrial, commercial, and again, apartment, they separate out, and homestead. I mean, it is a pretty significant difference when you compare it to our neighbors. Our industrial rate, our commercial. Was there a question there? Thought I heard somebody.
No, I think you're good. You're good.
Okay, I'm sorry. And feel free to interrupt me if y'all have questions. I'm sorry if I'm kind of running through this quickly, but I'll pause here and there if y'all have some questions. But you see here again, in terms of property types, there's quite a difference. Now, and again, it's an extreme. In terms of homestead, South Carolina has the lowest in the country in terms of property tax rate, which is good for y'all, right? It's good for the real estate market, but it still has an incredibly unfair shift of property tax to every other property type in the state. And so again, even though we have the lowest homestead property tax rate, we still have some of the highest commercial and industrial property tax rates. And I won't go too much into the manufacturing or manufacturing industrial rate, because we do know that there are fee in lieu of tax agreements in different counties, and there's a whole nother chapter related to that, but I'm going to save that unless y'all have some specific questions about that. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is our 10 county comparison. I mentioned earlier our 10 focus counties. Really what this is intended to show you is how the different property types, what the different effective tax rate ratios are for the different property types. So for example, you see commercial, apartment, industrial, and in each of those counties, the ratio, which is really the ratio between a primary homeowner tax rate and the commercial, apartment, or industrial tax rate, what that difference is. And you see here, when you get into the 2, 3, 4, 5% ratio differentials, that's very high. And again, most of that is attributed to the fact that our primary homeowner rate is so low. That is what creates that gap. But again, it's something that's very inequitable in our state. Okay, this slide is intended to show you a trend really over the last, 10, 12 years, how our property tax rates have changed before Act 388 and after. And so again, I think everybody understands the history here, right? We understand what happened with the housing boom in 2006 and 7, and then 2008, everything just starts to go plummet down because of the housing market bubble from 2008 bursting. And so you see here, and again, that's actually the reason why they passed Act 388, right? Because the home values were going up so high in certain parts of the state. So that was intended to provide some property tax relief. Well, unfortunately, it didn't really have the intended effect, because then the housing market bust and those home values kind of just stayed flat right there. And so the intended effect really wasn't there. And so over the last 10 years, you see here that primary homeowners in the blue shade have pretty much remained flat. That tax rate hasn't wavered too much, but then you see commercial industrial apartment has continued to trend upwards. And so their tax burden continues to be higher and is growing in that direction. It's not getting any lower, that's for sure. So here we have, again, that apartment / commercial homestead differential. And again, this chart just reflects around, if you compare us, the largest city in South Carolina versus the largest city in every other state, where do we rank? We are #1 in the country. We rank higher than New York City. That's pretty bad. That also means we rank higher than LA. We rank higher than Boston. I mean, just imagine all the large cities out there. Our differential, again, between what a tax rate is for commercial or apartment is so much higher than what it is for primary homes. I'm going to pause there. Does anybody have any questions about some of these charts? Okay.
I did have a question about, you know, kind of lobbying the, you know, the State House about these changes. And I know SER, you know, has a team that, you know, tries to do that. And it's difficult to change minds because, you know, it affects homeowners who are benefiting, you know, from the system. What is the state chamber, kind of what are you guys doing on your side, I guess, in terms of lobbying?
Yeah, so I'm going to get to that if you don't mind. I've got a slide that's going to actually show what the policy options the Lincoln Institute has recommended, and then what our next steps will be here at the chamber and the realtors. And we're working arm in arm with the Realtors Association at the state level on this. So I'm going to get to that slide in just a second.
Okay.
And I'll make sure I want to be on time for you guys. Yeah, I'm still got a little bit of time here. All right, so all right, so in terms of what their conclusions are, to be more specific, so they find that our property tax system is unusual. Again, not a surprise. 25 states assess all property types at the same %, meaning they're all level playing field. It's all an even ratio amongst 25 states. Those states that use a classification, like us in North Carolina, for example, North Carolina uses it only in a very limited way. So again, even though they may have a distinction between commercial and primary, it's not at the same level that we've got here. And then of course, South Carolina is the only state to exempt primary homeowners from paying property taxes for school operating costs. The next thing they say is our property tax system is unfair. Again, I'm going to just touch on this quickly, but as I've mentioned, the non-owner occupied properties are taxed 3 times higher than primary homes after Act 388 was passed. It was 2 times higher before Act 388. Again, that differential is extremely high. A lot of that is because of the school operating issue and the fact that homeowners don't pay that. Some of the data that they collected was very interesting, I thought. In terms of the shift, they actually have some hard data for us. York County was probably their best example because they got some really good parcel level data from them. But they found in terms of that shift from residential to commercial, in York County, residential property makes up 60% of appraised value, but 30% of taxes paid. Commercial property makes up far less, 19% of appraised value, but they're paying the same amount of taxes, 37%. So again, you see that, you know, the business community, the second home community, they're bearing the brunt of that burden. They also found that South Carolina's business share property taxes, which is estimated to be about 68% of total property taxes paid, places South Carolina 11th highest among the states. So again, pretty stark data here. In terms of it being complex, there's also actually a pretty big chapter on just property tax administration at the county level and how it's very different from almost every other state. And it's just very complex, but some things that just big picture things they say. Some real estate buyers don't know about the sizable property tax reduction available to primary homeowners. I don't know if that's entirely true. I certainly know that I get a really good rate as a primary homeowner. A new buyer must apply for primary homeowner status. I think we all know that. And then of course, assessment offices. And we did interview, I think all 10 assessors in each of those 10 counties. And I mean, they've got a tough job. You know, they have to devote a lot of resources to prevent fraud because they're always having to decide whether someone actually can qualify for that very lucrative primary homeowner rate. All right, so here we get to the policy recommendations. These are the things that they say the legislature needs to do to make our property tax system more equitable and more competitive. So they say we need to reduce the residential non-owner occupied homes from 6 to 4. Again, 3%, 3 times higher, and to avoid some of the fraud that we see. So residential is going to apply to apartment and second homes. They don't say that for commercial because there are a lot of states that do make a distinction between commercial rate and residential rates. The O&M exemption, of course, is the biggest issue. And I would agree with my good friend Carl about whether the legislature has the will to really tackle this, because this is really the major reason why our primary homeowner rates are so low. But their options are here to cap the amount property value entitled to the exemption. That actually was on the table for discussion before Act 388 passed. They were looking to just cap a certain amount to be able to get the exemption, and then the rest of your value would be taxed. That ultimately didn't pass, unfortunately. The other would be to replace it with the state education property tax. Again, I mentioned Michigan has done this. It's something we're going to do a little bit more digging on to see if there's any appetite for it whatsoever. And then the last thing would be to really let this be a local issue, kind of what Carl was talking about to some degree, but let locals kind of figure out how to deal with the O&M millage, and is there a way that we can cap or give local governments a little bit more authority to deal with that. I think at the state level, that's not going to go over well at all. I think a lot of folks at the state level think the locals tax too much, frankly. Another interesting thing they found is repealing the 15% assessment cap. I'm always curious to hear what people have to say about this. The reason they say this is because they found in their study that only a very small proportion of properties actually benefit from this cap. Again, you used York County as an example. Commercial properties benefited, I guess in York County, more commercial properties than residential had the benefit. Richland County is no different. It's a very small benefit that some residences received as a result of the cap, because a 15% increase over that period of time is just not as common. Now that may change now in this hot market because the prices are going through the roof. So we'll see whether this data ends up changing in the next year. Again, the cap has shown very little impact on the overall tax base, another reason to repeal it. And the other big problem I know realtors have had an issue with is the ATI point of sale. You're having to suddenly tax people at that point of sale, which sometimes is a bit of a sticker shock. So it would eliminate that ATI. The last thing I wanted to mention, because it really focuses on this group here in the central part of the state. We talk a lot, and Carl mentioned this as well, we have a lot of nonprofit tax exempt property in this area. And it really is probably what accounts for the fact that we pay 60% more here than in Charleston or in the upstate, because there's nowhere else to tax, right? You can't tax the non-exempt property. We've got too much of it. So one proposal they have is called a pilot program. Pilots are voluntary payments in lieu of tax. It's something you see a lot of other states have. It would basically allow on a volunteer basis, some of these nonprofits to make a payment to help contribute, right, to the state, to the local governments. The city of Greenwood actually does this. They get property tax payments from 4 of their healthcare entities down there, and it's a good amount of money. So if you can imagine, any scenario where one of these nonprofit tax exempt entities would make that kind of payment in Columbia, I think you'd see a definite lessening of that burden. But that is an option that they have on the table, and it is something you see in a lot of other states as well. So that's it for my presentation. Taylor, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, so I think there's some questions about, I guess, what was the reasoning initially about Act 388, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit about bringing down some of those, as property taxes were going up for homeowners, to bring that down. I guess the question is kind of more like why was it such a large impact on investors and commercial properties? Do you have any, I guess, perspective on that?
So in terms of the history, right, of the Act 388, we constantly heard the same story. There was this lady in Charleston that lived on the Battery, and she had this incredibly beautiful home that she'd been in for, generations. Obviously, you're talking about Charleston on the Battery. The value of that home increased so much over the years, and suddenly she couldn't afford to pay her property tax bill anymore. And she was a widow. So you'd hear stories like that over and over again, and people's property tax bills on the coast, again, most of this was coming from the coastal areas, really had a huge impact on our legislature. And of all the different proposals that were put forth, some far more reasonable than what ultimately passed, this is what happened. This is what came of it. And so that really was the impetus. It was just simply the value of homes going up so sharply during that 2005, 2006 period, and homeowners just crying out, homeowners / voters, right, crying out for help.
Okay. And then I don't think I'm not sure if you mentioned this or not, but somebody was just asking for your perspective about rollback taxes, and I guess how that relates to, I guess, if there was any explanation of that in the study.
So there isn't. Now, what I'll tell you is obviously there's been a lot of putting Band-Aids on our property tax system over the years. Lots of different ways that they've been doing that. I mean, one Band-Aid over the other, Band-Aid over the other. And so what the study does is really try to look at it from the bottom up instead of the top down, I guess, and see how we can fix it from its foundations. And that's the hardest way to do it, frankly. I mean, it really is. But I think our job here at the chamber, just to get back to your original point, Taylor, about what we're planning to do, our job here is to always look at the big picture. How can we improve our business climate in the state? And we do things, much more systematically. At least we try to, instead of piecemeal. And so what our plan would be is to take the study and go start talking to policymakers, which we already have. There's a ton of interest around this issue at the State House. Every single person we've talked to says, yes, our system is flawed. Tell us how we can fix it, right? Because they all get that Act 388 was problematic, but they also get that we do have the lowest property taxes for homeowners, right? And so we've got to figure out how, we can, systematically, I think, address this problem. And it's really just going to take a lot of all of us together collectively with the Realtors Association, Manufacturers Alliance, all these groups together going over there to see if we can kind of figure out a way to either start from scratch, and I know that's highly unrealistic, or at least come up with a more comprehensive way to address it rather than the Band-Aid approach.
Okay. And then and just one comment from Liz Cameron. It looks like she brought up that I guess she was looking at a shopping center in North Carolina and South Carolina, and that's valued at $1 million. And in South Carolina, the property taxes were $30,000, and in North Carolina, it's $7,000. So that's kind of what Swati was, talking about, and one of the issues in our state with our tax system. So.
Yeah, we are highly uncompetitive with our neighbors. We talked to a number of economic developers, county economic developers around the state. And York County actually is really hit hard. I mean, they talk about this a lot. We've got to do something with our property tax system to really be more competitive and to grow. And I mean, frankly, Columbia and the Richland County area, I do agree with Carl in that's a much bigger lift just because we have so much more complexity here. But I do think there's a lot of appetite to start talking about the issue and finding solutions. It's just a matter of having everybody together collectively go over there and have their voices be heard, frankly.
Swati, the partnership with the South Carolina Realtors and the state chamber, that's a great thing in identifying like your whole presentation. So, it's going to be interesting to see that now we're identifying the problem in great detail in the city of Columbia and statewide. And now how do we go forward in trying to solve the problem, right? And there's the big task, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, Act 388, 2006. So what it's been 15 plus. I mean, it's been a long time since it passed, even though I can't believe I've been at the State House that long. But it takes time for people to really feel the unintended consequences to the point that they're willing to speak out and do something about it. And so I think we've hit that point. And it very much is time to do something. And things ebb and flow here in South Carolina. I've noticed over the years. I've been in politics and the State House for 25 years, and everything has its time. And I think property tax is up on deck now.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Swati. We enjoyed that presentation.
Great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then, so before we move on to our next guest, we're going to move everybody up to on camera. So everybody get ready. You'll be on camera here for the rest of the meeting. So.